Spring 1943. German High Command faced an impossible task: rebuilding an army from the dead. The Sixth Army had ceased to exist at Stalingrad on February 2nd, when 90,000 starving soldiers stumbled into Soviet captivity through the frozen wreckage of the tractor factory district. Their field gray uniforms hung loose on skeletal frames. Their boots had frozen solid to blackened feet. Of those 90,000, fewer than 6,000 would ever see Germany again. Most perished in transit camps within weeks, claimed by typhus, dysentery, and starvation. Now, barely a year later, new divisions bearing that same cursed numeral assembled in the east. Fresh conscripts filled their ranks, whispering the name Stalingrad like a ward against evil. If you're interested in how wars are actually decided by logistics, math, and doctrine, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for more in-depth World War analysis. Let's continue. The few survivors evacuated before the final collapse carried the disaster in their bodies. Their letters home used careful phrases, heavy experiences. What we endured cannot be told in writing. They knew censors would black out anything more honest. But in the barracks and aid stations, the trauma surfaced. Medical reports documented nervous heart, chronic insomnia, men who froze rigid at the sound of wind crossing open ground. One Luftwaffe survivor who escaped the pocket before capitulation recalled that winter itself had become unbearable. The howling wind over the steppe triggered visions of comrades frozen solid in their foxholes, clothing turned to ice on their bodies, skin blackened by frostbite and peeling from bone. The reconstituted Sixth Army absorbed these broken men into its new formations, and with them came their stories. NCO Joseph Scharfstein had kept a diary during the encirclement. His entries read like dispatches from a dying civilization. November 22, 1942. As Soviet tanks closed the trap, Russian armor passes us and attacks from the flank and rear. Everyone flees in panic. We march 60 miles through the steppe. He noted renewed attacks at 1100 hours. Russian tanks and Katyusha rockets all run again. By December 6th, his handwriting had deteriorated. Letters cramped and uneven, weather worsening. Clothing freezes to the body, 3 days without food, without sleep. Fritz overheard them talking. The soldiers preferred to defect or surrender. Another sergeant, Helmut Meinberg of the Field Gendarmerie, recorded the moment Soviet air superiority became absolute. November 23rd. After lunch, Russian planes attack us with incredible fury, nothing like we have ever experienced. German aircraft nowhere to be seen. The following day, terrible fire. Our company loses half its strength, Russian tanks driving through our positions, aircraft attacking constantly, dead and wounded everywhere. Now in 1944, these memories infected the rebuilt divisions like a deep plague. Soldiers spoke darkly of the Stalingrad curse, a conviction that the Sixth was marked for destruction, that the army number itself carried death in its designation. That curse was about to be fulfilled, not by chance, by design. The Sixth Army's position in Romania was a strategic death trap from the moment they deployed. Behind them lay the Ploiești oil fields, producing over 150,000 barrels daily in early 1944. Roughly 1/3 of all Axis petroleum. Without Romanian crude, the panzer divisions would grind to a halt. The Luftwaffe would be grounded. The Reich's war machine would seize like an engine run dry. Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, had warned Hitler in May that oil was the weakest point in German armor. Attacks on Germany's oil industry, he later told Allied interrogators, delivered the most devastating blow to our war economy. The Sixth Army was not defending territory. They were defending Germany's lifeblood. But the defenses were paper, thin. Army Group South Ukraine, under General Johannes Friesner, stretched across 450 kilometers from the Prut River to the Black Sea. The German Sixth Army held the northern sector around Jassy with 7 understrength divisions. The Eighth Army defended the south with 8 more. Between them, Romanian Third and Fourth Armies filled the gaps. Nervous, poorly equipped formations that German staff officers privately dismissed as unreliable. One German officer wrote in his diary on August 15th, "The front was thin, divisions understrength, Romanians nervous. The Prut was low, but river crossings poorly prepared. We had no reserves worth mentioning. Across the river, unseen and unheard, the Soviets assembled an avalanche. Marshals Malinovsky and Tolbukhin commanded 1,300,000 troops and nearly 1,900 tanks. 3-to-1 numerical superiority achieved through maskirovka deception, so complete it seemed like sorcery. Dummy. Tanks of canvas and wood appeared in the Carpathians, their silhouettes visible from German reconnaissance aircraft. False radio traffic simulated armies preparing to strike Hungary. Real forces moved only at night, roads muffled with straw, cigarettes forbidden, tank engines hidden under camouflage nets near Tiraspol and Dubasari. Soviet signal intelligence later reported that enemy radio detection noticed increased traffic in the Carpathians in northern Ukraine, but failed to detect the actual concentration in the Jassy-Kishinev sector. A Soviet tank commander with 5th Guards Tank Army recalled the preparations. We moved only at night. Roads covered with straw to muffle noise. No cigarettes, no talking loudly. The Germans never knew we were there until the artillery opened. Hitler's Führer order ensured there would be no escape. The directive issued August 20th read, Army Group South Ukraine is ordered to hold every position under all circumstances. Withdrawal strictly forbidden. Every unit must fight to the last man and the last tank. Anyone who retreats will be shot. At 7:40 on the morning of August 20th, 1944, the Soviet double barrage rolled forward. The artillery preparation that began earlier that morning accomplished in minutes what weeks of fighting might not. The earth heaved, trenches collapsed inward, men sleeping in dugouts woke buried alive, clawing at loose soil and shattered timber. Hauptmann Hans Debisch of the 306th Infantry Division later described the destruction with clinical precision. German fire assets were literally annihilated by Soviet fighter bombers attacking the main line of resistance and rear positions. By the time the barrage lifted, almost no German artillery had survived. In a forward observation post east of Jassy, Unteroffizier Werner Krauss had been writing a letter to his sister in Breslau when the horizon turned white. The flash came before the sound, a wall of light that bleached color from the sky, followed by a pressure wave that collapsed his chest and blew out his eardrums simultaneously. He found himself face down in loose dirt, tasting chalk and copper. His helmet had vanished. His hands bled from fingernails torn away while clawing for purchase. The observation post, a reinforced bunker overlooking the Prut floodplain, no longer existed. Where the timber roof had been, open sky. Where his observation equipment had been, a smoking crater. Krauss dragged himself toward what remained of the communication trench. Air temperature had spiked 30 degrees in seconds. Heat from detonating high explosive creating thermal drafts that sucked oxygen from his lungs. Each breath tasted of ammonia and hot brass. His hands found something soft in the debris. A face, half a face. The left side of Gefreiter Bowman's head was intact, one blue eye staring with mild confusion. The right side simply gone, replaced by gray matter and bone fragments mixed with sandy soil. The barrage walked closer. Krauss counted intervals between impacts, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2. Soviet gunners had calculated their fire precisely, shells advancing toward him at 15 meters per salvo. He ran. Behind him, the trench disappeared section by section, earth opening like a zipper pulled by an invisible hand. Men he had served with for 18 months ceased to exist in intervals measured by heartbeats. The sound was not thunder. Thunder ends. This was mechanical, relentless. The industrial rhythm of 1,500 artillery pieces firing in coordinated sequence, shells arriving in overlapping waves creating continuous roar broken only by the sharper crack of direct hits on fortifications. The Romanian 4th Mountain Division and 21st Division were annihilated within hours. The 306th Infantry Division lost 50% of its strength in the opening barrage alone. Not across days of fighting in the first bombardment, destroyed apart from isolated strongpoints by evening. The 15th Infantry Division suffered similarly catastrophic losses. When Soviet infantry appeared suddenly inside German positions, Attempts to retreat dissolved under coordinated air attacks, mortar fire, and machine guns. One German survivor captured the speed of collapse. By the end of the barrage, Russian tanks were deep inside our positions. Near Skoboltsani, Romanian tank commander Ion Dumitriu's 1st Armored Division fought a desperate action, destroying 60 Soviet tanks while losing 30 of their own. A tactical success rendered meaningless by the strategic catastrophe unfolding around them. Dumitriu's division retreated south. The gaps torn in the Axis line were already irreparable. By nightfall, Soviet forces had punched through fortifications 80 kilometers deep in some sectors. Exploitation forces poured through breaches measured not in meters but in tens of kilometers. The encirclement had already begun. By dawn on August 21st, Stalingrad. Veterans knew exactly what was happening. The pattern was unmistakable. Breakthrough, rapid exploitation, collapsing flanks, the tactical signatures identical to the nightmare they had survived less than 2 years earlier. In captured letters and diaries, German soldiers described the experience with horrifying clarity. One Hauptmann's diary recovered near the Ploiești recorded the moment Soviet tanks appeared inside German positions. The same breakthrough, the same encirclement forming. We who survived the first death now face the second. Another letter never sent described the psychological weight more plainly. At Stalingrad, we did not know how it would end. Here, we know. That is worse. Hauptmann Hans Debisch, commander of 2nd Battalion, 579th Infantry Regiment, watched his defensive positions evaporate under Soviet assault. His battalion, like the entire 306th Division, disintegrated on day 1. By day 2, survivors scattered across the Romanian countryside. Unit cohesion shattered. The psychological curse the 6th Army had carried since reconstitution now became physical reality. Veterans recognized what was coming: the tightening noose, the shrinking pocket, the final collapse. But Hitler's rigid no-retreat orders prevented organized withdrawal. Units that might have escaped the encirclement were commanded to hold positions that no longer existed on any meaningful map. On the road to the crossings, Feldwebel Otto Brenner sat atop his Panzer IV, stripped to the waist despite regulations, skin lobster red and peeling across his shoulders. Temperature inside the hull exceeded 50 degrees Celsius, hot enough to blister flesh on contact with bare metal. His driver had burned his palm on the gear lever that morning, now operating with one hand, wrapped in a field dressing soaked through with sweat and serum. The column had not moved in 40 minutes. Ahead, the road to the Ploiești crossing was jammed with vehicles for 3 kilometers. Half-tracks, horse-drawn wagons, staff cars, ambulances with red crosses meaningless against Soviet fighter bombers attacking anything that moved. A dead horse lay across the road's center, bloated in the heat, its abdomen distended with gas until it resembled a gray balloon ready to burst. The smell reached Brenner from 200 meters, sweet decay mixed with leaking fuel, and the sharper odor of human waste from ditches where men relieved themselves in full view, because there was no cover and no time for modesty. "Jabos!" someone screamed. Brenner looked up. 3 Ilyushin ground attack aircraft emerged from the eastern haze. Broad wings, bulbous fuselages, the characteristic hump of the cockpit. The column dissolved into chaos. Men leaped from vehicles and sprinted for drainage ditches. Horses reared and kicked. One driver reversed his truck into the ambulance behind him, throwing wounded men from the open bed. Brenner dropped through the commander's hatch and pulled the cover closed. The first pass came low, 50 meters off the deck, close enough to see the pilot's goggles through the cockpit glass. The aircraft's cannons made a sound like tearing canvas. 23mm shells walking across the column in neat lines, turning trucks into funeral pyres and men into anatomical diagrams. A shell punched through the engine deck of the Panzer III ahead. The vehicle shuddered, lurched sideways, and began to burn. He watched through his vision slit as the driver's hatch opened and a figure emerged, wreathed in flames, moving with terrible purpose for 3 steps before collapsing. The Ilyushins circled for a second pass. When they departed, 17 vehicles were burning, the road completely blocked. The Ploiești crossing 12 kilometers ahead might as well have been on the moon. Malinovsky's 2nd Ukrainian front struck from the north, while Tolbukhin's third Ukrainian front closed from the south. The coordination was flawless, two massive Soviet formations separated by hundreds of kilometers converging on schedule with the precision of a closing vice. Radio communications maintained perfect synchronization despite the chaos of rapid advance. The pincers were designed to meet near Husi. They moved exactly according to plan. German units watched their escape routes disappear in real time. Roads west, the only paths to safety, were being cut by Soviet mobile groups racing deep into the rear. By August 23rd, the encirclement was complete, 100 kilometers deep. The German 6th Army, portions of the 8th Army, and Romanian forces still fighting alongside them were trapped in pockets around Jassy and Kishinev. The German 13th Panzer Division ceased to exist as an effective fighting force on August 23rd. The 306th Infantry Division, which had lost 50% of its strength on day one, was reduced to isolated strongpoints with no communication and no hope of relief. On the evening of August 23rd, as the encirclement tightened around the doomed German armies, King Michael summoned Marshal Antonescu to the royal palace in Bucharest. The meeting began at 4 in the afternoon. For 2 hours, the young king pressed Romania's dictator to sign an armistice. Antonescu refused flatly, insisting they must fight on. Then Michael spoke the prearranged code phrase, "Well, I'm very sorry, but there's nothing else I can do." A door opened. 3 non-commissioned officers and a captain entered and seized the stunned marshal. He turned and asked simply, "What is this?" Before anyone could answer, he was led away to a small room on the 2nd floor, guarded by palace gendarmes. At 10 that night, Michael's voice came over Romanian state radio. In Bucharest streets, trams halted, soldiers lowered their rifles, civilians gathered around radios in apartment courtyards. "Romanians," the king announced, "the war continues. But from today, Romania has changed sides. The government of Marshal Antonescu has been dismissed. A new government will immediately begin armistice negotiations with the Allied powers. The Romanian army will cease hostilities against the Soviet Union and will turn its weapons against Nazi Germany." The broadcast lasted less than 2 minutes. It transformed a catastrophic German defeat into total annihilation. In the German embassy compound in Bucharest, Obergefreiter Karl Hoffmann was asleep in the courtyard garage when Romanian machine gun fire shattered the windows. He rolled off his cot and grabbed for his rifle in complete darkness, finding only empty canvas and grease-stained concrete. Someone was screaming in German, high-pitched, continuous, the particular sound of a man gut-shot and aware of what that meant. He found his weapon under the cot's metal frame and crawled toward the garage door. The courtyard had become a killing field. Muzzle flashes from surrounding buildings illuminated the embassy facade in strobe light glimpses. Shattered masonry. Running. Figures. A Gestapo agent in civilian clothes attempting to cross open ground and being cut in half by converging fire. Romanian soldiers on the perimeter were not firing warning shots. They were firing to kill. Hoffmann pressed himself against the cold stone wall. 20 minutes ago, the Romanians had been allies, sharing rations, trading cigarettes, complaining about officers in broken German-Romanian pidgin. Now they were executing every German uniform they could see. A staff car attempted to exit through the main gate. Its headlights illuminated the machine gun nest on Jassy-Kishinev, barrel tracking the vehicle with practiced calm. The gunner waited until the car was fully exposed, then fired. The windshield dissolved. The car veered left, struck a lamppost. No one emerged. Within hours, Romanian troops opened fire on their former allies throughout the country. At Băneasa airfield, Romanian anti-aircraft batteries destroyed 6 German aircraft attempting evacuation. Smoke from burning planes filled the sky, the acrid petroleum stench drifting across the capital's northern suburbs. In mountain passes west of Brașov, Romanian artillery established positions overlooking the Predeal Pass, the main escape route toward Hungary. German convoys jammed the roads, half-tracks and horse-drawn wagons stretching for kilometers. On August 26th, Romanian 75mm guns opened fire. A Romanian artillery officer later described the engagement. "We set up our batteries on the slopes above Predeal. The road was jammed with German vehicles. They did not expect us to turn against them. We opened fire with guns and mortars. Explosions lit up the pass, air thick with smoke and burning fuel. Thousands of German soldiers abandoned their vehicles and attempted escape through the forests. The trap had become absolute. Between August 23rd and 31st, Romanian forces captured 56,000 German prisoners and killed 5,000 more in scattered fighting. Inside the shrinking pockets, the 6th Army died for the second time. By August 22nd, divisions had ceased to exist as tactical units. Franz Josef Strauss of Panzer Regiment 4 later recalled the terrible truth. The division ceased to exist as a tactical unit on the 3rd day. The enemy was everywhere, the pattern instantly familiar to Stalingrad veterans. First came ammunition shortages. By the 2nd day, organized resupply had become impossible. Soviet mobile groups were deep in the rear, destroying supply depots. German infantry fired their last magazines into dust clouds of approaching Soviet armor, then waited with bayonets fixed. In a field hospital inside the pocket, sanitator Heinrich Voss faced a decision no medic should make. Morphine had run out on the 3rd day. Voss had been a medical orderly for 27 months, through Kursk, Korsun-Cherkasy, a dozen nameless actions across Ukraine. He had removed shrapnel from screaming men without anesthetic. He had held soldiers' hands while they bled out from wounds no surgeon could repair. He thought he understood suffering. He was wrong. The field hospital, a requisitioned barn in a village whose name he never learned, contained 147 wounded men. The number had been 162 that morning. 15 had died since dawn. Nowhere to put bodies except outside against the barn's eastern wall, faces covered with bloody bandages because no one had clean cloth for shrouds. The smell was catastrophic. Gangrene had set into compound fractures. Belly wounds had begun to putrefy. The latrine pit overflowing, August heat accelerating decomposition until the air itself seemed to rot. A Feldwebel with both legs amputated above the knee was weeping, not from pain. The nerve endings were dead. From thirst. No water delivery in 18 hours? The village well hit by Soviet artillery that morning. Its stones scattered across the square, its water mingling with blood of 2 men who had been drawing from it when the shell landed. Water, the Feldwebel whispered. Please. Voss had nothing to give him. Outside, Soviet artillery grew closer, shells walking toward the village in methodical increments. We have to evacuate, someone said. Voss looked at the wounded. 147 men, perhaps 30 could walk, perhaps 15 could be carried on 2 remaining stretchers, the rest would stay. He began making selections. The Feldwebel watched him approach other beds, watched him shake his head at some patients, nod at others. Understanding spread across his face. You are leaving us, he said, his voice calm. Voss could not answer. I was at Stalingrad, the Feldwebel said. I flew out on the last Junkers, January 31st, 1943. Do you know what I saw from the air? Thousands of men standing in the snow, waiting to die. Artillery sounded again, closer. I thought I had escaped, the Feldwebel said. I thought I had cheated it. The last thing Voss heard as he left the barn was the Feldwebel's whisper. The curse follows the number. German columns arriving at the Prut River found Soviet tanks already dug in on the far bank. Machine gun fire raked the approaches. Bodies floated downstream in August heat. The psychological collapse came faster than at Stalingrad. Then, men had held out for weeks, clinging to hope of relief. Now, in August 1944, they knew better. When Romanian artillery opened fire from blocking positions in the rear on August 24th, unit discipline shattered. Soldiers abandoned vehicles and fled into forests. Some units simply stopped fighting, waiting for Soviet infantry to accept their surrender. Near Hushi on August 30th and 31st alone, 9,000 German prisoners laid down their weapons in a single event. They walked in silence. Gefreiter August Lehmann had dropped his rifle somewhere on the road 3 kilometers back. He could not remember precisely where. It no longer mattered. The column stretched ahead and behind as far as he could see. 9,000 German soldiers shuffling east under guard, uniforms caked in dust, boots torn, faces blank with exhaustion. Soviet guards flanked the column on horseback, submachine guns resting across their saddles. They did not need to aim. Where would anyone run? The steppe extended to every horizon, flat, featureless, offering no concealment, sun beating down without mercy. Lehman's tongue felt like a leather strap. His lips had cracked open that morning. He had licked the blood without thinking, which only made the thirst worse. The man beside him, a Feldwebel from some supply unit, rank insignia torn away, stumbled and fell. He did not get up. 2 Soviet guards rode over, dismounted, checked for vital signs, left him where he lay. No one in the column broke stride. No one looked back. A Romanian soldier approached and spat. "Hitlerist," he said. The word required no translation. Lehman thought about the letters in his pocket. Correspondence from his wife in Königsberg. Her neat handwriting describing their daughter's first steps. The garden they would plant after the war. The life they would resume when he came home. He had carried those letters for 7 months. He reached into his tunic, removed the bundle, and let it fall. The column marched over the pages without breaking stride. When the pocket collapsed, what remained was destruction that staggered comprehension. 200,000 German troops gone in 9 days, not wounded and evacuated, not withdrawn to new positions. Gone. The German Sixth Army, reconstituted after Stalingrad, rebuilt division by division, sent to defend Romania with solemn promises that history would not repeat, had been annihilated for the second time in less than 2 years. 18 German divisions ceased to exist as coherent formations. Entire corps vanished from Wehrmacht order of battle maps. Army Group South Ukraine, which had fielded hundreds of thousands of men and hundreds of tanks on August 19th, no longer existed. Marshal Tolbukhin characterized the operation as a second Stalingrad. The comparison was mathematically justified. Over 300,000 Axis casualties in 10 days, including German and Romanian forces, killed, wounded, and captured. The rate of annihilation exceeding 30,000 per day, faster than virtually any encirclement in military history. Stalingrad had taken 5 months. This took less than 2 weeks. Soviet losses were remarkably light by Eastern Front standards, roughly 13,000 killed and 54,000 wounded. A ratio of destruction almost unprecedented in the war. Ploiești's refineries ceased production on August 22nd as Soviet forces closed in. Germany lost its most critical resource, the oil fields supplying roughly 1/3 of all Axis petroleum. The Wehrmacht's vehicles and the Luftwaffe's aircraft all depended on Romanian crude. Now the pipelines ran dry. By September, fuel allocations collapsed. Panzer divisions received supplies measured in days, not weeks. Training flights canceled across the Luftwaffe. Pilot instruction dropped from months to weeks with barely enough gasoline for basic familiarization. Entire armored formations sat immobilized, their tanks useless monuments to a war machine suddenly paralyzed. When news reached Berlin of Romania's defection and the loss of Ploiești, Hitler raged at the treachery. Hundreds of thousands of casualties protecting the oil fields, and the oil lost anyway. As German forces fled the Balkans in late August, Anglo-American newspapers filled their front pages with different stories entirely. On September 18th, the New York Times heralded Operation Market Garden with maps, photographs of transport aircraft filling Dutch skies, breathless accounts of the daring gamble for the Rhine bridges. 3 weeks earlier, the Red Army had annihilated an entire German army group in 10 days. Over 300,000 casualties, 18 divisions destroyed, Romania knocked out of the Axis. Yet Western coverage reduced it to wire service snippets about Romania quitting the Axis. David Glantz would later observe that Soviet offensives like Jassy-Kishinev rarely receive the analysis they deserve in Western narratives. Victims of Cold War dynamics that gave disproportionate attention to Anglo-American theaters while underestimating or ignoring Red Army offensives. Paris's liberation on August 25th received iconic coverage. De Gaulle striding down the Champs-Élysées, crowds weeping, bells pealing across the city. The Eastern Front remained arrows on maps, abstractions of space and numbers, its greatest victories erased by deliberate forgetting. Hans Debisch, whose battalion was destroyed by Soviet airstrikes on day one, later recalled that his men's final words were not prayers or patriotic slogans, but bitter acknowledgments. Stalingrad, again, the curse, had proven prophecy. In an isolated strongpoint inside the pocket, Lieutenant Erich Vogler sat in the remains of a stone farmhouse, his back against the wall where the kitchen had been, his pistol resting on his knee. 23 men had held this position 48 hours ago. 7 remained. The cellar where they had stored ammunition took a direct hit that morning. The explosion killed 4 men instantly. They spent 2 hours collecting what they could find, crawling through debris that still smoked. Final count: 67 rifle rounds, 11 pistol rounds, 2 stick grenades, no water, no food since yesterday, no contact with any other German unit. Vogler had been at Stalingrad, not in the pocket, wounded in the leg during September Street fighting and evacuated before the encirclement closed. He spent January 1943 in a hospital in Breslau, listening to radio reports that grew progressively grimmer until they simply stopped. He had thought the wound was a curse. Now he understood it had been salvation. Lieutenant Brandt crawled through the gap where the front door had been, face gray with dust, lips cracked and bleeding. Movement in the orchard. Vogler looked through his field glasses, Soviet soldiers filtering through the apple trees 300 meters south, khaki uniforms blending with late summer foliage. He counted 12, 14, 20, more than their remaining ammunition could address. "How many rounds do you have?" 9. Vogler removed the letter he had been writing. Half a page to his mother, unfinished, placed it in his breast pocket. There was no one to mail it to. Now. The Soviet soldiers reached the orchard's edge, organizing for a final rush. 11 rounds, Vogler said. 7 men, make them count. History's cruelest repetition was not that the Sixth Army died twice. It was that it died twice knowing. Hundreds of thousands of men lost protecting oil fields that were lost anyway. 200,000 prisoners marched into captivity. The Sixth Army destroyed twice. Survivors bearing witness to repetition so precise, it transcended coincidence into prophecy. Soviet soldiers reached the farmhouse wall at 1647. Vogler fired until his pistol locked back on an empty magazine. Grenades detonated. Stone fragments peppered his face. A boot appeared in his peripheral vision. He looked up. The Soviet soldier was young, 18 perhaps, face sunburned and impassive, submachine gun at waist level. "Ruki Verk," the soldier said. "Hands up." Vogler released his empty pistol. It clattered against stone. He thought of Stalingrad. He thought of the 90,000 who had surrendered there, and the 6,000 who returned. The soldier gestured with his weapon. Vogler raised his hands and stood. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more World War II historical deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.